I apologize that I wasn't here yesterday, but I'm so happy that, thank you, Alison, for making it happen today. So, I like to call myself a quantum engineer. So this means that I build apparatuses to study and control things that are so small and so well protected from their environment that they're better described by the laws of quantum mechanics, as opposed to the laws of classical mechanics that rules everything around us. So what on earth am I doing here? So if you allow me to talk to you, so I would like to say that I would like to present to you a series of ideas that goes a little bit broader in scope than just longevity. Longevity is there, but bear with me. I'm here to tell you that right now there is partial but consistent and correlational data that biology is using the laws of quantum mechanics to function and to function in a very optimized way. So there you see just some examples of quantum phenomena playing big roles in biology. For example, enzymatic function is mediated by a quantum process called tunneling. There's evidence that there are some quantum processes in nature, for example, photosynthesis, olfaction, that seem to rely on quantum vibrations to function. For example, there are experiments that seem to indicate that in the case of olfaction, people usually think that olfaction works by a lock and key mechanism, and someone has partial evidence that you need actually lock and key and a vibrational signature in order to function, and this theory of olfaction might actually be much more widespread to many other G-protein coupled receptors. Also, there's another quantum phenomenon called delocalization that seems to be influencing how opsins work and how photosynthesis works as well. But I'm here to talk to you about yet another quantum phenomena having to do with spin-dependent chemical reactions. So spins, a spin is a merely quantum property that is as fundamental as charge or mass, and electrons have spins, atomic nuclei have spins, and spins measure how well a quantum object interacts with a magnetic field. And this whole talk about spins in biology started with birds. Okay, I really personally do not care about birds, but birds were very instrumental in bringing this conversation to the mainstream. So it's known that, so first of all, magnetic fields can alter spin states in electrons. Okay, so you can think about an electron having, usually a spin is depicted as an arrow. Engineers and physicists depict spins as an arrow, and spin arrow up or arrow down, spin up or spin down, mean different energy levels of this merely quantum property called spins. And magnetic fields can actually alter if a certain spin is up or down. Now, there's evidence that birds, when they migrate, there's evidence that they're feeling the magnetic field of the Earth to do so. And if you think about it, it's sort of crazy because the magnetic field of the Earth is smaller than the magnetic field that you sense when you put your cell phone close to your face. And the only model standing on how they're doing this is by spin-dependent chemical reactions. So here's how this works. And this is known in test tube chemistry, it has been known for decades in a field known as radical chemistry. So there's a chemical reaction happening, and at some point the chemical reaction comes to a crossroads, and the chemical reaction effectively measures the state of a certain electron spin. So if a certain electron spin is up, the chemical reaction continues through one branch. If a certain electron spin is down, the chemical reaction continues through another branch. And importantly, the final products of those two branches are macroscopically different. So a very brief interaction between the electron spin and a magnetic field at the time that this chemical reaction comes to a crossroads can have macroscopic consequences, right? Because the final products of those two branches are different and at much longer time scales because everything happens sort of downstream. So this whole process of interaction with magnetic fields during this injunction in chemical reactions takes between a nanosecond and a microsecond, and this is where I come from. This is incredibly long, and this is orders of magnitude longer than any of the other quantum processes in nature that I described above. So my bet is that if nature is using quantum mechanical degrees to function, it's doing so using something that is slightly longer in time, which in my case is from nanoseconds to microseconds. So the other important thing that you want to know is that chemical reactions that depend on spin are only sensitive to small magnetic fields. That is, if you put a test tube inside a magnetic resonance machine that provides magnetic fields on the order of Tesla, those magnetic fields will not alter the chemical reaction. And there's a reason for that having to do with spin physics. But the good news and the bad news is that magnetic fields on the order of those produced by your cell phone can either cause chaos or improve things if you know exactly what sort of magnetic field is needed to tweak each particular chemical reaction. So everything that I'm going to talk about here is iron-free. There is no whatsoever iron involved in this type of magnetic field sensing. So there are two ways at which nature seems to be using spins to function. The first one I won't have time to talk about. It's a super cool phenomena called chiral-induced spin selectivity. And there's evidence that electron transport in bacteria and mitochondria might prefer a certain spin state, which is very unusual. And if you want to know the truth, when you have a quantum computer, for quantum computers to prefer a certain spin state, it requires some energy to do that. So it seems that nature has found a shortcut to do exactly what quantum computers like to be doing. But I would like to concentrate on modality number 2, which are those spin-dependent chemical reactions, and I won't have time to explain, but the way that those spin-dependent chemical reaction works, they do work in the exact same way as a technological quantum sensor, which is crazy if you think about it. So it's very funky. So again, this whole talk would be very, it would be much poorer if this whole shebang would only apply to birds. In fact, there's evidence that many other types of physiologically important chemical reactions are dependent on magnetic fields in a way that is consistent with it being spin-dependent. I'm just going to list some examples there of such chemical reactions. So the production of reactive oxygen species depends on magnetic fields in a way that is consistent with spins. Glycolysis rates, acidification rates in cells, respiration rates in cells, planaria, regeneration, DNA repair in bacteria, cellular fluorescence using flavoproteins in mitochondria is magnetic field sensitive. And then I just got lazy, and instead of putting the names of the papers, I just copy-pasted some titles of papers there. So anesthesia, methylation, there's a lot of things that seem to be spin-dependent, and that's this last item here, I have a hypothesis that ion channels might have a very close relationship with spin-dependent chemical phenomena, in that fluxes of ions, transient fluxes of ions inside cells might be producing transient magnetic fields in very specific ways to alter those spin-dependent chemical reactions, and conversely, spin-dependent chemical reactions happening on the membrane, such as lipid peroxidation, which is spin-dependent, could be altering ion channel function. Again, and at the same time, right? I mean, as I mentioned, those spin-dependent chemical reactions have to do occur at magnetic fields like on the order of those produced by your cell phone. So I actually think that it's granted that someone does a very systematic investigation of the effects of cell phones into our physiology. And unsurprisingly, cell phones do not want to fund this research. So I want to before I give you a little bit more details on what we're doing, I would like to show you that picture. And I have the authorization to show you that picture. So I have a friend who's a bona fide precision measurement atomic physicist. So what he does for a living is he builds hypomagnetic chambers that is very good Faraday cages, and then he shoves cold atoms experiments inside. And it doesn't matter, but it's something very high tech. So he started hearing about like magnetic field effects in biology. So he was like, maybe I should do something. So here's what he did. he took tadpoles, and he had, before he needed to ask for a bio authorization, he could work with them for like 2 days in the lab, so that's what he did. And he grew tadpoles for 2 days inside a hypomagnetic chamber that he had in his lab. So just to have an idea, the magnetic field of the Earth is about 50 microtesla. Inside his chamber, he has a noise level of 1 nanotesla, so orders of magnitude smaller. So what he did is he grew tadpoles for 2 days inside those hypomagnetic chambers. In one case, he actually put a mimicked magnetic field of the Earth inside, and the tadpoles were good after 2 days. And in the other case, he just left the tadpoles for 2 days under this like nanotesla field. What he saw is that for the case of just the nanotesla field, the tadpoles were macroscopically about 30% deformed, right? Which is really crazy, and it's just macroscopic data, but given the fact that you're not even giving magnetic fields, you're taking out tiny magnetic fields, and you're screwing up that badly, right? Everyone's best bet is that this is spin dependent. And actually, melanin, the thing that gives tadpoles their color, there's very rich spin physics in melanin. So if you start thinking about this, really opens up a big Pandora box of stuff, right? I mean, we can think about using deterministic, like if we understand how each magnetic field can drive certain chemical reactions, we could think about like influencing physiology for good or for bad. And I just want to point another thing is that like, what's the magnetic field in Mars, right? Can we grow lettuce in Mars? Can we can we reproduce in Mars? So there's all sorts of interest in studying magnetic fields in biology. So here's what I want for in 25 years. I want to control endogenous spin degrees of freedom in biology towards Theranostics in general. Again, everything is endogenous. There is no need to genetic manipulation. The end goal is easy. Like the end goal is to have a gadget that sort of transforms those spin-dependent spin-dependent chemical reactions in your body. But what takes time is the code book, is doing quantum-inspired experiments to find which magnetic field influences which chemical reaction. I'm going to skip those things. I am going to finish by saying that what we do in our group is trying to get the code book right. That is building high-tech experiments, which are basically glorified microscopes with coils to control those quantum degrees of freedom in biology. So sometimes it gets very lonely in here because there's no support. I can spend a lot of time talking about those things to you, but yeah, thanks for hear me out, and I finish like I always do, which is by saying, may the quantum be with you. Thank you.